Today's video is a very basic, back to the basics, or for beginners who are very new to acrylics, or a review for those who haven't done it in a while. So what we're going to do here is just use some simple acrylic paints. Here I'm showing you the difference between two kinds that I have. One is more fluid and watered down, and the ones in the tubes are thicker paint. It's called heavy body paint. And then the ones I think in the the jars, little plastic containers, are called fluid acrylics. So they're going to be runnier, but with a high pigment load, so it's less than, so like you can still make these paints runny, but it's going to have less pigment load, I think. But you can still make it a thinner consistency with water. But it's going to be harder to make the thin paint thick, so you just need to keep that in mind. So I use a lot of the fluids for my darker colors, because a lot of times I use really thin coats of dark colors, and not so much with my lighter colors. They're usually sitting on top of darker colors, so I usually use the heavy body with lighter colors. But it's a lot of trial and error. I would suggest, for what you can afford, get the basics, and then if you want to try some fun stuff, these are some of the mediums I can use to add volume and thickness and loft to the paint. And then this is a glaze that actually kind of thins it without breaking the pigment, and slows the drying time, and it also can make it more transparent. This one's kind of dried on top. It's almost gone. But yeah, just playing around with some of these things. You don't need these to get started, though, as far as the glaze or the gels. But and you honestly don't even need, if you had to choose between the two, I would choose the heavy body, because you can always thin it. And these are just some of my brushes: a mop brush and a lot of flat brushes, and then a few liner brushes, or smaller round brushes are what I usually use. So mostly I use these flat brushes, because you can do both thin and thick strokes with them. And they're really nice because they have that sharp edge to get into corners. I don't use tapered brushes as much, or filbert brushes, which kind of have a rounded top but they're flat, because they don't have that corner on them, or that can, which I like. So this is the mop brush. It's nice for large swaths of just kind of general color. It's hard, it's not good for details. I use an apron, so that was that. This is kind of nasty looking, but it's my, obviously, it's got paint all in it over it. It's a measuring cup that I've turned into a water dish, so you'll need a container for water. And then I always wear gloves, disposable gloves, because I don't want the paint on my hands. And then you can use rags for cleaning up, or here's some Kleenex that I'm using, whichever you prefer. All right, so what else we got here? Okay, so I think I'm literally just picking out of a box a couple colors, and what do you know, they both end up being blue. So I decided to use the fluid, and a heavy body, plus some zinc white. So I think that's like a danthradone blue, and then a cobalt blue. So you can see the cobalt's a little brighter. But when you mix them with the titanium white, they honestly look about the same. But we're just going to, I have a piece of canvas um, paper. It's canvas paper, which it's actually like a primed canvas cloth. Um, I would suggest for beginning work getting some either paper that's made for acrylic paints, or they make really affordable canvas panels, or really affordable canvases. Even a lot of times you can get them buy one get one free at craft stores and art stores. So just something that's not going to break the bank, because I don't want you to feel stressed about just experimenting. You need to just put down some paint on a surface, and I don't want you to feel like, I mean, don't use like a $70 canvas for this. Just something really inexpensive. Um, so I'm just showing you, I'm putting down some strokes, and then I showed how you can blend with a dry brush. I blended the lighter color into the dark and the dark into the light. And then I'm using the side of the brush like I showed you. Even though it's a whiter brush, you can still use the edge of it for finer lines. So I'm just kind of making like a sphere or a ball with a shadow and a highlight. It's not turning out very good, but just mostly just experimenting on my paper. And I would suggest doing the same. Just take a couple colors. They don't have to be in the same color family. It could be opposites on the color wheel. But I wouldn't do more than 2 or 3 to get started. We're mostly just wanting to keep it simple so you can focus on your brush strokes and just seeing how the paint performs and mixes, and how it lays down. I actually just wiped it. You can kind of see the leftover. Just wiped it before it dried. Oh, this is something I discovered, kind of a hack. I ran out of the special soaps for cleaning your brushes, and I just used Ivory soap, and it's not quite as good. It doesn't have as much fat in it to break up oil paints, but it is, you can get a little lather and it's not bad. And I mean, that was just something I had, and it's super affordable, and I feel like the Ivory's not as harsh as some soaps. I wouldn't use it on a sable brush, which is a lot more fragile, but I think it's fine for the bristle brushes. Okay, so I'm just using my round brush to put down some squiggly lines. And if it's breaking up, then you need to add more water. So that makes it, especially on a textured surface like a canvas, you might need the paint to be runnier to get it over the tooth of the canvas. Sometimes it depends on the medium you're using. Like if you're using a smooth surface, like wood, like a really gessoed wood, or even a metal surface or glass, it's going to perform differently than a canvas. And even with canvas, you can have some that are like triple and quadruple primed, fine linen with a super fine tooth, or you could have a really rough texture, almost like burlap even. I've seen both extremes. So yeah, it just depends on your surface. So you need to just play around with different surfaces too. Here is just my palette knife, and just so you can do both the flat edge to do a wider swath of, or brush stroke. It's not really it's a knife stroke. And then here's a thicker stroke that leaves like a lip on each edge. Then you can, I'm just showing the edge of it again, makes like lines. And here I'm just scraping off paint now. All right, so I think we're going to make I'm just going to take some primary colors and zinc white, and then at the end I add some titanium white, because zinc white is great for keeping the colors of your paints uh, while lightening your color, and not losing the color. But sometimes you need to go a lot brighter or lighter, and then I use a titanium white and I add that later. It's a lot less transparent than the zinc, and I'll show you the difference on the golden paints. Put a little swatch sample of the paint, and there's three black bars underneath it, so you can see the transparency or opaqueness of the paint color. So you'll see the difference when I show you the white paints later on. All right, so I'm just using a portion of the canvas. I cut it out and taped it down, and I'm getting some brushes here, and I sprayed some water. It's important to make sure that your paint doesn't dry out, so you might have to keep spraying it with a mist of water. And I forgot to mention that at the very beginning, that I always have a mister. I have actually a nice fine, ultra fine mist, but you can just use like a 99-cent, just like a hardware store or a drug store spray bottle too. Doesn't have to be a fancy one. All right, so I'm just now doing a little abstract art, no real rhyme or reason, but just mixing colors, and I'm going darker on the edges and then lighter towards the middle while I just blend. I don't necessarily want to use all these colors at their full strength. That's something that you'll, as you get more used to painting. I mean, obviously there's so many rules with painting and art that, I mean, some people would maybe use all saturated colors, but I find in general, I mean, like this yellow here, it would be fine. But if you put every single color down like that, it would be like everybody trying to be a soprano in a choir and singing at the top of their voice. And okay, here's what I was telling you about. Can you see how the zinc white is a lot more transparent than the titanium white? The titanium has a lot more coverage and is better for those really like highlights or the lightest lights. And if you want coverage, if you want to cover something, then you need to use titanium, because it's like titanium, like zinc, like when you want to block the sun off your skin, like on your nose, if you're out on a tropical boat somewhere all day and you don't want a sunburnt nose. So yeah, it's just got that coverage that you need. So I've added the titanium now to get that really nice pop of white. But like I said, the zinc white has its benefits too. It doesn't get the brightest brights, but it holds the color of the blues and the yellows better without fading them, I guess you could say. All right, and there's really no rhyme and reason. As you can see, I'm even just mixing. A lot of times when I do more realistic art, I make sure to always mix the paints really well, so that each plane of the picture is very like a solid mixed plane that is well defined. But since this is more abstract, I leave some kind of streaky, unblended areas. And then some areas are really thin, like that purple, which is more transparent anyway. You can really see the whites in the brush strokes, which I kind of like shining through. And then on the yellow, you don't see as much of that because it's more opaque. but then I added a bunch of like variances with the thickness, and also you can see some of the blue in there kind of makes it like a green. A few green brush strokes in there gives it some variation, and I'm gonna cover up some of it because it's just too much, I think too much yellow. And so yeah, here we go. And this doesn't have to be a masterpiece that you plan on hanging in your entryway. So just have fun and don't sweat it. So one thing I'm going to do here towards the end is mix all the colors together and just kind of create some harmony with that, and also just like a nice grays. I really like nice grays. It's always fun to have a bunch of different grays on your palette, I think. They come in handy a lot. So this is the zinc white because I wanted to keep those colors shining through. And the titanium I feel would have overpowered it. But you can see it's mostly a warm, the reds and the yellow is taking over more than the blue. Some colors are more, I call them bolies, like they overtake in a mixture more than other colors. So definitely the red and the yellow are more prominent in this mixture. Anyway, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed and have fun exploring your acrylic paints.